Hello, everybody. This is Gino Johnson, CEO of Champions for Veterans, and I am so excited for today's episode of Convos with Heroes. We have a very special guest with us today in George Taylor, and we're just really excited to talk to him. So, George, sir, I'll go ahead and before we kind of introduce you and bring you on to tell the world about who you are, which most of the world already knows because George has been on a lot of podcasts. I'm excited to have you on ours, sir, but I'll go ahead and do a quick introduction for our listeners. So Dr. George Taylor arrived at Southwest Minnesota State University in August 2020. He holds several degrees, including a doctorate in management, organizational leadership, a master of business administration or information systems technology management, and is currently pursuing a PhD in education leadership. He's also certified as a senior professional human resources professional, senior certified partner in human resources, and is a lifetime certified professional coach. Dr. Taylor's teaching interests include organizational development, leadership, and entrepreneurship. He is an active researcher for the OK Center for Education Policy, a think tank center that focuses on state and national education policies. Dr. Taylor is a published author and frequent speaker in research conferences and symposiums. He's the author of a popular book entitled Blessed Strategy. Prior to teaching, Dr. Taylor served a distinguished enlisted-to-officer career in the U.S. Navy. While serving in the Navy, he was assigned as a task force team leader and member for several high-level strategic initiatives to include Sea Warrior, a human capital initiative that transformed the Navy's HR processes. Dr. Taylor has a strong record of entrepreneurship and business coaching and was a leadership fellow for Memphis in 2004, or Leadership Academy Memphis, where he served on various citywide initiatives. Dr. Taylor is married with 3 adult children. He loves to travel, work out, and spend time with his family. I mean, with his wife, who is his family right there. So, sir, shall I call you Dr. George, Dr. Taylor? What do you prefer?
George.
George. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, George. Sir, man, I'm excited to have you on with us today.
I'm excited to be here. I'm glad that I'm having this opportunity to share a little bit of my story and hopefully leave some comments and drop some gems for people to ponder and also learn more about you in the process.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of great experience teaching entrepreneurship, helping folks. So I know we're going to be able to get some good information. I like to use these podcasts as a way to also help me, like you said, provide some good input, some insights, some opportunities for us to grow and just really make a difference. So, but before we kind of get into all of that, tell everybody who you are. Who is George? Tell us about your upbringing, your life, and
I love that. So I'm gonna give you my elevator pitch here that I share when I'm on these podcasts, and I'm gonna make sure that I emphasize the leadership and management piece of it. So I'm originally from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Chattanooga, Tennessee is the 4th largest city in Tennessee. And right after high school, I joined the Navy. So I broke tradition, so to speak, because the tradition was if you're a male, you need to go to Morehouse. You're supposed to be a Morehouse man. If you're a female, you're supposed to go to Spelman College. I remember I told my pops, I said, I'm going to the Navy. He said, well, as long as you're getting out of here. And so I went into the Navy and I served a distinguished 24-year career, enlisted-to-officer. And that's a mix of active duty and reserve. So I went into the Navy as a yeoman. And for those of you who don't know, a yeoman is essentially an administrative assistant. So I stayed as administrative assistant until 1997. And in 1997, I was promoted to the rank of Chief Petty Officer. For those of you that are familiar with Navy rank, you know the E7 through E9 community run the day-to-day of the services. And so from there, in 1999, Gino, I took a demotion. I became a naval officer. That's what the chief community tell you. So to make sure everyone is following this journey with me, naval officers represent the middle management in a senior level in the services. And I was essentially what they call a human resource officer. And so I specialized in manpower management as well as recruiting and selection. And some highlights of my officer career include twice serving as the department head. In my second department head tour, Gino, I had a department of 150 people in support of 1,000 military uniform personnel, as well as 1,000 civilian and contracted personnel. And that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about leadership. I learned a lot about resource management, IT management, how to deal with people. And I call that tour my interpersonal skill deep dive tour. You know, you get things done through people. You get things done by empowering others and being that servant leader. And during that time as a department head, I really got to define what type of leader I am. So that was a very, very enriching and insightful experience. From there, I went to this command, I call it Navy Corporate Headquarters in the area of human resources, and we call it Navy Personnel Command. And so when you were reading my bio, that's where Sea Warrior comes from. So when I had the opportunity to serve on Sea Warrior, one of the good things about Sea Warrior, Gino, is I was the initial task force team members, one of 10. And I was the initial strategic communications officer on that project. And so I led all things communication. And that taught me a lot about the art of communication, just how important communication is and how to use all channels, whether that's a press release, whether that's a town hall, whether that's a stand-up presentation, whether that's a technology webinar. No matter what you're doing, the way we communicate matters. And also while serving on this project, I had an opportunity to really get deep in my hands dirty in the areas of manpower management, training and development, workforce development, work-life balance. And most importantly, one of my passions is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So having the opportunity to lead or co-lead in all these human resource process areas was very important to me. And then from there, they pretty much took me out to retirement because that is a huge initiative pursued by the Navy that is still going on to this day. So it started off as a task force, but now it's a project management office that still exists. And they pretty much are still working on those same initiatives to this day, of course, accounting for mission changes, changes in vision, and changes that come about through technology. But at the end of the day, the aim of that initiative was to recruit and retain the best and brightest that the Navy had to offer. And then from there, I went into education on a full-time basis. So my first full-time job in the Navy was with Tulsa Community College. And in Tulsa Community College, I served as the assistant human resource professor. And I would tell you that was a good time because when I got there, Gino, that program was kind of dying on the vine. There was like 7 people, students in front of me. And the first thing I thought to myself is, this program is not going to make it. And I remember going to the dean. I said, well, when you hired me, you didn't tell me that I only had 7 students. And, you know, he's still a good friend to this day. He's still a mentor. He said, well, if I told you that, George, you wouldn't have came.
Right.
But you fast forward to the day, and that program is doing well. It has max seats. And the thing that's very rewarding about that period of my life in Tulsa Community College is many of those students, I want to say at least half, have either got their first job in human resources or they have promoted in human resources. So you got students who were either unemployed or minimally employed, dropping letters and notes to me and saying, you know what, now I make $120,000 a year. Now I make $150,000 a year. I'm doing meaningful work. I can provide for my family. It seems like every other week, I'm getting an email update from one of my students that are just telling me about the joy that they're finding in their work. And that was very rewarding.
Yeah.
In 2020, I had the opportunity to pursue a tenure track position at Southwest Minnesota State University. And that was probably one of the best moves I made. And the reason why is because at Southwest Minnesota State University, it's a remote rural area. And I never had direct experience with rural America before this. And me being a proponent and champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, got to see the unique diversity and inclusion considerations specific to rural America.
Mhm.
When I got here, SMSU, Southwest Minnesota State University, I also noticed that I had entrepreneurship experience that I want to share a little bit with you, with your listeners. So I became the first director of the Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I would tell you, Gino, it has been a ball. I have had the opportunity to watch student entrepreneurs flourish into these jobs, to really start these companies. And the first semester I was here, they didn't know I was a real entrepreneur. And so they thought this was going to be more of a theoretical experience, right? And then when they got that challenge, I was like, no, you're going to do elevator pitches. No, you're going to file your LLC or your S corporation. No, you're going to really start your companies, and we're going to help you soft launch these companies. And you're going to do test marketing. You're going to speak with city leaders, and you're going to speak with entrepreneurship leaders. Their eyes just got big. And so now you fast forward to today, and these same student entrepreneurs, they just can't wait for the next challenge. They don't bat an eye. And just to see them grow into this student entrepreneurship model where they get to practice persistence and grit and collaboration and teamwork, all those attributes that we attach to the entrepreneur mindset, I have the honor of seeing that every day, and there's something special about that. Now I want to kind of just go off to the beaten path a little bit and tell you about my entrepreneurship experience, because that's a big part of my story.
Well, I want to definitely get into some more nitty gritty of that kind of stuff. And
okay.
I appreciate you kind of doing that high level overview of all the different things you've done. And I want to definitely dig into the entrepreneurship stuff, because I feel like that's going to be, we're going to probably spend some time on that. But let's take it all the way back to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Growing up, because I'm familiar with Chattanooga. I live in Smyrna, Georgia. And so I've been there. Actually, used to work on a client in that area. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. Tell me about that upbringing, and just, it sounded like your father also served, or you kind of had a military background in your family. But just tell me a little bit about your upbringing there.
Oh, no problem. So my father is, he's one of my heroes, you know, and what I mean by hero is we had a good history of people that went to HBCUs and made something out themselves. Yeah. So Chattanooga is what I call a big, small city. It's medium size. I think its population is around 400 to 600,000. Don't quote me on that, but that's approximately the population. So my father was a Morehouse man, and he became the first personnel director for the city of Chattanooga, in which he led the human resource function. It was personnel then. And that was a big deal, Gino. And so when I would walk around town, everybody say, oh, you Spooky's son, or you George Taylor's son, or, you know, our director. And I say, yeah, that's me. And sometimes to this day, I still walk around and they'll look at me and they say, hey, George, how you doing? I'd never seen him in my life, right? So they still, I guess I look like him a lot. But I always say, when you start somebody's story, you almost have to go back at least 2 generations. So my father's father was a physician in Chattanooga. And so we had a staple legacy, so to speak, when I was born. So I kind of stepped into that legacy. And so when I walk around town, some people that know my granddad would say, oh, you Doc Taylor's son. His father was a doctor. So you have this rich history of men going to Morehouse, and this rich history of women going to Spelman. And so it's a family tradition, so to speak, to either be a medical doctor, to be a professor in academia, or to be some type of white-collar professional serving others. So my family history consists of a history of serving others and enabling others to be their best self. My father was what I call a fairly strict disciplinarian. He was the type of guy that made sure that his kids got haircuts every 2 weeks, meaning the male kids. We went to good private schools, and we ate dinner together and we prayed together. And I think that's a very good question that you asked me, because these form the foundation of the value principles that I have. My mother, who was equally influential in my life, was a nurse. She just recently retired. And so she met my daddy while he was at Morehouse, and she was going to Grady Hospital. And she served a very successful career as a nurse in critical care, emergency room, and then later hospice care. I am the middle child. My oldest sister is a medical doctor in the Air Force, and my youngest brother is doing retail management in Atlanta, Georgia. And so we're a fairly close family. Over the years, we got a little bit closer because at this season of our life, we know the importance of family. So that kind of gives you a glimpse into my Chattanooga upbringing. Your small town, big town, small town feel. Family values were important. Yeah, it was nice.
That is really, man, that's really incredible. I mean, I'm just impressed at just that deep family history of just educated, yet education. You guys have served the community and just really just done amazing stuff. I can kind of see now, it makes a little bit more sense the path that you ended up taking. But I guess, you know, the way it sounds, so your dad, your grandfather, they didn't serve in the service. What was that? I know you had said earlier that, you know, you went off the beaten path, but what led you to go into the Navy versus going to Morehouse?
Well, this is a two-part question, a two-part answer I'm gonna share with you. My granddad actually did go into the military.
Okay.
So he's a veteran of the Korean War, but he didn't stay in the military. He's a doctor in the Army, and he had this funny story that I'm going to condense, but it's going to make you laugh. And so that's when the Army and Air Force were kind of together. I think it was called Army Air Corps, something like that. And my granddad, I remember before he passed, we had this relationship where it was kind of tense because he didn't know what I was going to do from a career perspective. And I remember that one of my initial lead periods, he's in his late 70s, and he said, "I'm so proud of you that you went into the Navy." He said, "I was worried about you." And then he said, "You probably know I was in the Army as well." I said, "Yeah, Granddad, I know." He said, "You know what?" He reflected a little bit. He said, "I should have stayed." I said, "You should have stayed?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "But when they asked me to extend my service," he said, "I was in the middle of a battlefield, an airfield. There were bombs going off. They said, 'Doc Taylor, are you going to stay with us a little longer?'" And he said he had heard all the mortar fire, the machine guns. He said, "Well, Colonel, you asked me at the wrong place at the wrong time." He said, so that was the end of my career in the service. But he valued that time. And, you know, it's funny because you're right. Those two things of military service and then academia or being a medical doctor, it all came together because my sister was the last person I thought would go into the service. So she became a doctor first, but then she took those skills to serve her country. And I became a service person first, but I took those skills to become an academic. So it's like, you know, like a Venn diagram, right?
Yeah.
It's our family, it's the medical doctor, it's the academic, and it's the service. And somewhere, a lot of us have kind of met where we're in all three spaces in the Venn diagram.
Yeah. That is so amazing. Was it something that you guys just saw growing up, or was that, I mean, I would assume in the house growing up, you guys were just taught like, hey, pursue education, go and do something great in the world. And kind of how was that upbringing, and how were you guys led to just really be so successful in your lives at this point?
Well, again, another good question. Some of it was picked up in our subconscious. You know how you look at a picture?
Yeah.
You don't know what that picture signals something to you. Or you talk to your parents and your grandparents and they tell you their journey. And some of it was guidance, but it wasn't strict guidance where you say, hey, this is the path you need to go. But, you know, in many ways, as you know, we're reflections of our parents, either consciously or subconsciously. So I think that subconscious got into me a little later, because I will be totally honest with you. I didn't know where I was going because I was not as focused as let's say my sister, who was very focused. I didn't know where I wanted to go, but I know I wanted to do something. And my parents were of the opinion that whatever it is you do, you make sure that you go out and you make something of yourself. So the service was like the saying marketing terms, low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
I can't go anywhere else. I can go into the service.
Yeah.
But I would tell you that that's probably one of the best moves I ever made, because that's when I got to recognize the other talents that I had that I was kind of suppressing or didn't really recognize in a very intentional way, like I did while I was in the military. So when
Yeah.
I'm in the military, education had been preached to us by our parents all through our lives. But I found that I had a natural, aptitude and cognitive level of skill, reasoning, and all that together to kind of think through complex problems, to relate very well to people. And I started graduating at the top of all the classes. And you know what, Gino, that's when I discovered that I did have some talents that, if nourished the right way, I could go on and do great things. So I'm not convinced that I would have discovered that piece of my identity had I not had the opportunity to serve. But to the other part of your question, my parents also made sure that we understood the value of education. My father said a story that sticks with me to this day. He said, as a Black man in America, I want you to remember this. You need to know your story. You need to know your history. And you need to know that with your race, with your lot in life, you're going to have to work very, very hard. But you know what? That's just how it goes. You don't whine. You don't complain. You do what it takes to get it done to make sure that you can provide for your family and live a good life. But at the same time, and I think this is where my inclination for diversity, equity, and inclusion comes in, he said, you must recognize that other people have a story as well. And you need to dig deep into their story and find out who they are, because that's how you expand your worldview. So this is like in 78 and 80, when I'm 8 and 9 and 10 years old, and he was teaching me about diversity, equity, and inclusion before we had the fancy label, right? He was just a man that had this expressive worldview that served him well. And he wanted to make sure that his children had the benefit of not only knowing who they are, but also taking the time to know the story of other people.
Wow. Man, that is so deep and so cool. I mean, I can definitely see that. That is, it's a valuable truth there. I can recognize it in myself growing up. I feel like I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I want to be a businessman. I feel like I can, as far as I can think back, I wanted to just do something that I was able to get started and run and build something great. But my dad's always been that. And, I think that hearing him, seeing him be an entrepreneur, from after he retired in 2000, early on, he started public speaking and just living the entrepreneurial lifestyle. I said, you know what, that's what I want to do. I want to start something and be able to have flexibility in my time to not only create an income, but also serve my family and be there and be available for my family. And so that's kind of been a driving force. But, my dad didn't say, hey, be an entrepreneur all my life. He just was an example of it.
I
So
love that. I love that.
that's, wow. That's really cool. So you ended up going into the service 24 years. Like, did you go into it saying, you know what, I want to retire and do that? Or what was your mindset going into it?
Gene, I'll be completely honest with you. I'll go on tour to tour to tour trying to figure it out. And every time I completed a tour, I was like, where do I go from here?
Yeah.
So my first tour was on the USS Saratoga. And at the time, the USS Saratoga was in Norfolk, Virginia. And she was in the yards. And I would tell you, man, that was a miserable experience. It was cold. The floors were taken up. People were grinding all through the night. And I remember I tried to get out as soon as I got in. And I remember calling my mom. I'm like, Mom, I'm coming home. Daddy would come. My dad got real ill. And she said, you're using your father's illness as a crutch. You just don't want to see this through. She said, but just try to see it through. And that's mom being mom. And so I had the benefit of serving on the USS Saratoga for 5.5 years. And I came in as an E1 and I left the E5. And I remember all the other officers that served enlisted service prior to being an officer. They would look at me and they would say, man, you are ranking so fast. Do you think about becoming a naval officer? And I said, you know what? I thought, to be honest with you, I was coming in as a naval officer. That's how little I knew about the service. And so that's how I started acquiring my first mentors. And they spent a lot of time with me, and they started pouring themselves into me. And so when I left the USS Saratoga to go to Annapolis, Maryland, I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a naval officer. And so I worked like heck to try to do the best job I could. And in Annapolis, I had a very, very good time. I was runner-up for Sailor of the Year for the entire United States Navy. So I got all these Sailor of the Year awards and all these Sailor of the Quarter awards. But more importantly, that tour in Annapolis taught me the value of serving the community. And during that tour is when I made what we call E6, which is essentially like a first level supervisor. And so when I left that tour, I went to Japan. And so I get to Japan, and at first I was miserable because I was trying to make my sole existence on the base. And I remember going back to my mom said, look, because I'm still a young man, I'm like 26. My mom said, I think you would enjoy it a little bit better if you try to experience the culture, just like your father told you. So I'll go out and I experienced the culture, and I fell in love with Japan. I mean, Japan is one of my favorite places that I ever lived. And so here's another label. Unintentionally, I knew the importance of global leadership, having a world view, and cultural intelligence. You know, those weren't the labels I was using, but that's the experience, or what the experience taught me. And that's why I was fortunate enough to become a naval officer. And so I become a naval officer, and my first tour was very challenging. First assignment was very challenging because the commanding officer saw something in me. And what he saw was his words: you have a way with people that I never seen or rarely see. I want to leverage that connection because my job as the commanding officer is to recruit and retain the talented sailors, and I wanted to leverage your connection. So he fleeted me up to a department head tour. And that was my second department head tour. And I remember clearly how challenging that was. And I was just thinking to myself, man, you know, what do I do? I'm already thinking I'm a good leader, but I found out that I was just a mediocre leader at best, right? And so what made me mediocre is because I thought I could lead that department by myself. And what I mean by myself is I didn't know the principles of delegation. I didn't know the principles of empowerment. I didn't know the principles of trusting others and giving them the resources where they could do their best work. I felt like being a leader meant I outworked everyone and used very little or no one. And I remember this guy, I won't forget, I'm gonna give him a shout out. His name is Joe Gant. Joe Gant came to me and he just said, just imagine this tall, good looking brother. He comes in and he goes, hey, Lieutenant Taylor, you're losing us. I said, losing you? What do you mean I'm losing you or us? He said, you do not know, or you have yet to discover how to lead a large department. And I'm gonna tell you what, if you want to do it by yourself, we're gonna let you do it by yourself. But he said, but me, I want to help you. And if you trust me, I can help you ascend or aspire to become the leader that you're trying to be. And so that's that reverse mentorship in real time. And I just remember like, man, this is amazing. Now I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I didn't like it when I heard it.
Yeah, I bet. Because
I
you
didn't like it when I heard
you, right?
but I trusted him, right?
Yeah,
And trusting him, it just became a great tour. Yep. And so to answer your question, I didn't know what I was going to do from tour to tour, but I do know that when I got to Navy Personnel Command in Middleton, Tennessee, the entrepreneurship bug started biting me. And I said, you know what? I can have the best of both worlds. So when I got to Navy Personnel Command in 2004, I went to the Naval Reserve to complete my Navy career. And then I started focused on being this full-time entrepreneur when I was not in uniform.
And that was, how long were you in active duty?
14 years.
So 14 years, and you spent, what, 10 years in the reserve and going to this entrepreneurial journey here. Wow. Yeah. Exactly. I'm excited to hear about that. So what did you end up doing with entrepreneurship? And okay, what made you decide to be an entrepreneur? Because that's not a common thing in general, right? So what made you do that? And then what did you end up doing?
Again, it goes back to your parents. And this is a great question because you give me some good reflection points. And my mother always preach the principles of entrepreneur. She said, you know what, instead of buying such and such, you could start the company. Instead of spending your money on clothes, you could take that same money and you can invest it. And I remember when Chick-fil-A first came out, those franchises were like $5,000. And I remember my mom saying, no, I think it was $50,000. She said, you could do Chick-fil-A. I'm like, Mom, I'm an E2 in the Navy. I don't know where I'm gonna get $50,000 from.
Yeah.
But again, on my mother's side of the family, I need to talk about that side a little bit more. They were entrepreneurs. They come from the sharecropping days of in Mississippi and in Tennessee. And, they had to open up candy stores and supplement their income. So again, you're part of your parents' story. And so entrepreneurship started really, really inspiring me, I started to get the entrepreneurship bug in the early 2000s because I started meeting a lot of entrepreneurs as I was pursuing my grad degree. I said, you know what? I'm not that much different than they are. I can do this. And so my first company was this IT human resource company, and it was called Vision Achieve Strategies. And Vision Achieve Strategies help client organizations, primarily in government, migrate from legacy IT footprints to ERP systems and CRM systems, which are still in use today, though they're cloud-based. And so I still got that company. It's been renamed because there's other owners involved, and that company called Intercorp. But also, while being this consultant, I was also, I started becoming interested in real estate. And so in real estate, I started buying houses and selling houses and renovating houses and flipping houses. I think some of this runs in your family as well. And, that was good. Money was good. Life was good. I was sitting on top of the world until 2008 hit. So for those of you that might not know, 2008, we had the subprime mortgage crisis, and I had $3.5 million worth of real estate that I didn't know what to do with, right? And I remember calling my mother and I said, well, Mom, I got close to $4 million in real estate. I don't know how to offload this. I said, so I think I'm gonna just let them go. And my mom said, did you take the bank's money? I said, yeah. And then she said, well, you need to find out how you're gonna pay them back.
Yeah.
So I'm up here trying to renegotiate debt and, work all that out. But it taught me a lot about going back to communication, framing expectations, staying true to your values. But ever since then, whether I'm consulting as an individual, whether I'm consulting in my company as an IT consultant, whether I'm dabbling in real estate, or whether I'm just doing private investments to help the next entrepreneur, entrepreneurship comes very natural to me. And so I feel very fortunate to kind of influence this next generation of entrepreneurs as they start their business. And they're excited to have me as well. And the reason why they tell me is because they say they feel like, we're in like an entrepreneurship boot camp every day. We know that you know this, and by you pushing us into this zone of discomfort, our confidence grows in us, and we're more confident in what we do. And so it's kind of like, you see your dad every day, or you communicate with people every day, and it's not that you don't think what they're doing is not hard or doesn't take a lot of courage, but their intimacy lets you know that you can do it too. And so that's why I think it's happening with the students. They're like, yeah, you're talented. Yeah, you're good. But you know what? I can do it too.
Wow. It reminds me of the book Grit, where, it talks about, okay, talent versus, just that desire to just knuckle down, go after it, know what to do, and just work hard. And so, I mean, you're just the example. Like you said, you're naturally, you have a skill, a gift, you got the family experience and that inspiration there, but you also are helping other folks to be just like you and get started in entrepreneurship as well. I definitely want to get taught, because I mean, you're in education and you're educating in entrepreneurship. So, I don't know, let's kind of do just a case study, just to get some insight from you on a business. Let's say, for example, not anything specific, but say maybe you have a company that's been around for a year and a half, online education organization that maybe helps veterans. I don't know. I mean, something like that. What would you What advice would you give to just an entrepreneur and a company that's kind of brand new, small company, continuing to grow, providing a great service to the world? What's the advice that you would give?
One of the things I do when I consult with clients is I always tell them or ask them, what is your story? Who are you serving?
Yeah.
So as they re-articulate their value proposition, I'm looking for a couple of things. Number one, are they staying true to their organizational statements? Now, a lot of people think that organizational statements don't mean much, but your organizational statements mean a lot. If you don't know your day-to-day that's embedded in the mission statement, then how are you going to lead others? If you don't know where the ship is going, then how are you going to reach that ideal future state? And as I've grown older, Gino, something else that I'm finding increasingly important to business success is the new company staying true to their values? And some of these companies don't even have value statements. They can't even articulate their values to me. So after we get through this organizational who you are, where you're going, and then what are the philosophical beliefs that guide you, then I want to know just what are you offering? What makes you special? And why should I do business with you? And if the entrepreneur kind of struggles or grapples with that, then we're going to have a conversation, especially if I'm hired, right? Because you got to know what your value proposition is to your customers, because if you don't, then you can articulate what's special to you. And yes, you may start off with some success, but as your business scales, that's generally going to catch up with you, as you know, being a small business owner yourself. And then as they start to articulate their value proposition or what makes them special and unique, one thing I want to know is, well, how are you going to scale? And then how are you going to advance to make sure that your business is around, or at the very least is positioned to sell, right? Because one of the biggest failures in family businesses or small business is they don't have succession planning. And I want to know your workforce plan. I want to know what their organizational charts look like. So show me the positions first, then show me the names that's going to go in the boxes. If you don't know those names, then we need to have a conversation about your training and development, about your workforce development, about your succession planning, and about positioning your company for sale if that's what you intend to do. Or at the very least, inviting other investors. And then I started getting into the nuts and bolts. We started looking at cash flow statements. And as the saying goes, cash flow is the blood of the organization, right? Without cash coming in, you're going to cease to exist. But as important as cash flow is and your financials are, it really starts with knowing what your company is all about. And so where some people put financials in the front, I put financials a little bit after that, because I want to know the philosophical beliefs. I want to know who you're serving. I want to know what makes you special. I want to know how you're going to develop people. And then I want to know how you're going to provide value to your customers. And if you can answer that, then we can have a conversation about your financials, because if you can address any of that, what I just mentioned, well, we don't even need to talk about your financials, because you're not going to be in business long enough to worry about it. And these are things that but I really appreciate that question, because you give me the opportunity to kind of say it in an elevator pitch way of why that's so important. And one thing that I want to say to your audience is, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, make sure that it's something that gets you out of bed, whether you're paid or not. Make sure that it's something that's tied to your purpose, or ideally is your purpose, because building a successful, sustainable business takes time. And one of the mistakes I made in my early business ventures is I equated long-term success with how much money I had in a bank account. But what I didn't know is that there's a burn rate associated with that. So as I'm trying to grow, right, but I'm not taking care of my customers, or I'm not articulating my message good enough where they can really distinguish me from the noise, well, that burn rate pretty quick. And I got humbled very quickly when I went from this near 7-digit, reserve account to barely hanging on, right? Barely being solvent. So I know the importance of these value propositions, and knowing your market, and knowing your numbers, and taking care of your people, and making sure that you clearly articulate the value that you're going to provide to your customers. I have lived and breathed this for 20 plus years now.
Yeah. Wow. George, that's gold. I feel like what you just shared, I mean, that's definitely some powerful and really great foundational stuff that, if you don't really know it and kind of can see that and conceptualize that, I know you may be able to see the concept and go, oh, wow, that's important. But when you really kind of bring it down to like that elevator pitch level of information, like you shared, I mean, that sets up an entrepreneur really well and gives you the important things to look at. We're going through, we're pretty young, and we started off with the mission, and that was something that, I mean, me personally, I'm more of a vision kind of guy. Like, everything starts off from our visions, our thoughts, and just putting it out there and thinking big picture, having big goals, and then putting the details together after that. And we're going a lot of the direction of what you've just shared, and we're actually even talking through consultants and talking through all of that right now. Is that something that you do? Do you provide consulting services to small businesses?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the heartbeat of what I do. And
Okay.
so what I do in very concrete terms, I believe in being concrete, is I go into companies and I have two drivers that I'll look at: the driver of human capital and the driver of technology. And my goal is to integrate these two drivers together in a way that's going to propel your business forward, consistent with its strategy and its vision.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question I ask is, let me look at your workforce plan. And of course, the majority of our clients don't have workforce planning, or they're just getting started because, that mom and pop, I do everything. I got the organizational chart in my head, but there are no names or there's no numbers on my financials, or my financials are in a shoebox. I said, well, how are you using technology? I find out that they have layers and layers of these convenient software solutions, but right from the start, they're already experiencing two problems that entrepreneurs face every day. Number one is you have an IT footprint that's going to be out of control as you scale because you're not maximizing the full functionality of what you have right now. And number two is you're not making the transition from small business owner to a true entrepreneur. A true entrepreneur, like you just alluded to already, is they have a vision in their head. And if you're going to have a business that's sustainable, you have to start thinking about replacing yourself every day. You also have to know this is so important. You got to know that the people that you hire are coming to your business for reasons that may be a little bit different than yours. But they're coming to your business ideally motivated, looking for something that's going to make their lives special, so that those values bind your business together. Those are the common things. Those are things we have in common. However, there are some unique elements to your identity, to what motivates you. And these are the things that are going to bring your employees to work. Your job as an entrepreneur is to make sure that whatever motivates them is known and is embedded into the fabric of your workforce planning, so that your employees feel like they can bring their whole self to work. Because if your employees feel like they can bring their whole self to work, then they're going to give you the best of them. And so that's so important, because your high costs are not your equipment. Your high cost is not even your technology. Your cost, as you know, is in the people that you hire. And if you got people turning over, you got people not taken from your company, if you have people that don't feel connected to your place of business, they're going to leave. And it takes a long time to find a qualified replacement, to train and develop that person, and then to motivate them to bring their whole self to work where they feel safe and where they can see what they do is important to the success of your organization. Because contrary to some cynical belief, most employees want to contribute something of value to the success of your company.
Wow. Wow. I love that. You just dropping just some heavy nuggets over here, George.
I hope so, man. I mean, this is such an important conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just see this, Gino, every day. I just see how very smart people start these companies, and they're cashing out 401ks. They're taking lifetime savings on this vision and this dream that they have. And they're just making some mistakes that can cost them their business, and they are good people. They know their business. but the art of entrepreneurship takes you have to expand your view. It's not just about taking your passion or this craft or this skill and then creating profit and providing value. It's about setting up systems, controls, mechanisms, and structure so that your business can scale and so that your employees feel a part of what you're trying to build and that your customers see value in what you're providing. So all those three have to work together to make sure that your business is truly sustainable.
Wow. Awesome. That is awesome stuff, George. Man, I appreciate everything you're sharing right now. I mean, and especially to our listeners, to everybody who's going to be hearing this later on. I know this is going to be just some great nuggets that people can kind of take and run with. But I know you mentioned that you're consulting and how can, if somebody would really want to reach out to you to get some consulting help and services, how would they go about doing that?
They can email me at george.taylor@entorcorp.com. And I'm going to spell Entorcorp. Entorcorp is ENTORGCORP.com. They can also call me. I give my number, just a work number, area code 901 240 2058.
Wow. Hopefully you get a lot of calls from this podcast, and you may get tired of getting so many calls. And Intercorp, that's your company that you started?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. That is how long have you been doing consulting?
So I've been doing consulting since 2004. That Vision Achieve strategy company that I shared with you, that opened in 2004. And then what happened is in 2011, as our client base expanded, I had to bring in additional people. And so I brought in this very talented managing partner. And now we have a solid employee who is probably going to be one of the owners one day. And then we got our team of contractors and other employees. And when I brought in the other managing partner, going back to Vision, he wanted to make sure that we got back to the core of IT and human resource consulting that drives company forward so that they can achieve their strategy. So there were other things in the holding company that I had to cut out in order for him to come in. And so that's why you had the name change from Vision Achieve Strategies to Entorcorp.
Got it. That is, wow. That's awesome. It's solid stuff. Now, hopefully you really do get a lot of people reaching out to you. I definitely want to check you out and see what Entorcorp is all about. So this is really good stuff, George. I know you've already given some great advice to entrepreneurs. You're teaching entrepreneurs, and you're kind of doing a lot of really different things. I guess kind of going back to your service and you went in, you did your thing, you retired. Is this your vision of where you thought your life would be now? And what do you feel like your life is going to go next? Like what in terms of your career and the impact you want to make on this world?
To me, life is essentially a 4-chapter book, and I'm making this up from my heart. But you got your childhood, right? And then you got young adult, and then you got middle age where you learn some lessons, but you're still fairly young. And then you got your life after work, what we call retirement. So I'm in chapter 3 of 4 chapters. Yeah. So if I could say, if this where I thought I would be in a remote town, like 15,000 people, environmentally, no. Yeah. But professionally speaking, I'm exactly where I should be. And so I think this is important. And I'm a man of faith. I'm a man that believes that spiritual well-being is part of being successful. Yeah. And this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I have achieved things that I never thought I would achieve in my life. Yet, having said that, I'm not done. Yeah. And like I share with my wife all the time, there's still gas in the tank. I'm still a young man. I'm still early 50. When I say early 50, like at the first two years of it, right? 51. And so that's a lot of life left. I believe in giving all you got. I believe in living your purpose because when I do reach my 80s or 90s, and I'm laying on that bed, hopefully with my kids and grandkids, and maybe a great grandchild, I want to make sure that I have a story to tell. And to your earlier point, how you opened up this podcast, I want to make sure that there's a legacy. You know, a legacy to me would be, did I empower others through education, insight, role model leadership, how to be their best selves? And, you know, a quick story I want to share with you is that I was in church and this young guy came to me and he put his arms around me and my wife. He looked me in the face. I never seen him before. I never saw him. He said, I don't know what you do, but something tells me that you are in the field of helping others. He said, I see this file cabinet on your desk. And he said, whatever it is you do, you already are known as a key voice. He said, but you're going to empower others in which your ceiling is going to be their floor because you keep lifting them up.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that was God speaking through him to tell me what my destiny was going to be. And as long as I'm empowering others, as long as I'm helping people be the best versions of themselves, then I feel like I could just take this out as long as I possibly can.
That is awesome. You know, it's amazing when you're driven by passion to really make a difference in the world, just like what you shared to entrepreneurs, people starting a business. If you don't know who you're serving, why you're doing this, your why, your mission, then, you know, life, it's just not what it could be. And it's amazing what you're doing. And it's really cool that you're always on that mission doing great stuff. And so that's encouraging. It's inspiring, George. You got anything else you want to share with our listeners? Any other information that will be good for them to hear?
I just want to thank you, Gino, and I want to thank your company and your father, Ranger, for the great service you provide to veterans, because there are a lot of veterans that don't know what they're due. And to take others and equip them with the knowledge and the resources needed to make sure that they get what they have earned, I think it's so important. And I remember when I met you in Oklahoma, I didn't feel like, you know, I had the need, or I felt like there were other things that I placed ahead of this. But it goes back to knowing your customer. And I remember thinking to myself, for all the listeners out there, the importance of not giving up on a prospect, because a prospect is not necessarily telling you no. A prospect is telling you maybe not right now.
Yeah.
And so when I got settled in Marshall and I found out just how difficult it was to get what was owed to me, what I earned, I called your company.
Yeah.
And I just think that's one of the biggest lessons in entrepreneurship. You know, your prospects have other things going on in their lives. And if you don't give up and you trust that they're going to remember your story and the value that you provide to them, then you're going to be in business a long time. It's like that prospect to client funnel that you and I are very familiar with. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a person get to that client stage very quickly, then sometimes it's going to take a while, but don't stop telling your story. I have enjoyed getting to know you, Gino. I have enjoyed getting to know your father, and I admire the work that both of you are doing for veterans and their families.
George, man, I really appreciate that, sir. You know, it's definitely an honor to be able to serve and to be able to make a difference and to be able to help people the way we have been able to do. And man, I'm thankful that you are part of our program and excited to be able to help you get the benefits that you deserve. And thank you for your service as well. You know, really appreciate what you've done, not only in serving your country, but also in serving the community the way that you do right now. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, George. We're going to go ahead and end it here. I know that the folks who've been listening to this episode of Convos with Heroes have really gotten a lot of value out of it. And I'm just excited we were able to have you on. And, you know, you shared some great insights. It hasn't even been an hour yet, but I'm sure if we kept this going on for another few hours, I'm sure you have a lot more information that you can share. But I'll let other people reach out to George Taylor at george.taylor@intercorp.com if you have questions and want to talk to him about consulting and really connect with George here. So thanks a lot to all of our listeners, and thanks for listening to Convos with Heroes.